Okay, guys, today we are going to take our first what I call screen recorded note session on continuing with our lessons on geography and maps and so on. As I talked to you before, I want you to take notes on this. I want you to listen to me and write down what I write within this keynote. If you're an average note taker, at the end of the day, you'll just have a simple outline with everything that I wrote down. If you're a very good note taker and you want to improve your note taking, you should write down what I have and then also all the little extra things that I have to say in the session today, okay? So our session today is entitled Contemporary Geographic Tools, okay? Now, if you stop for a second and you look at the images, you can see that there's a lot of familiar things going on here within this lesson that you already know about. The first thing that you got to look at and the first thing that you should be thinking about is that word contemporary. Contemporary. Contemporary means new. Contemporary means up to date. So these are things that are new, these are things that are modern, and these are things that are being used right now in what we call our contemporary world. So to go along once again with our lesson on geography and mapping, today's lesson at the start is all about contemporary geographic tools. Now, the first thing that we're going to talk about is something called GI science, and we're going to analyze data. Now, GI science is the analysis of data about Earth acquired by satellites and other technology. Now, if you've ever seen a map of a town, a gridded out town, it was probably taken from a drone that was put up above the town, all right? That would be an example of GI science, all right? That's the analysis of the data about Earth, and we can use this to map out cities, areas, see how distances are, and that's basically what this is all about today. Now, the first word that's associated with that, and you can see it in the word, is GIS, okay? So GIS stands for Geographic Information Systems. Now, these are ways that you capture and that we store and that we display geographic data, all right? Each type of information is stored in a layer, and we come up with maps and different ways of looking at it. Now, there's two terms that are associated with GIS, or Geographic Information System. It's the ways that we get our photographs from up above Earth's surface, whether it's close to the Earth's surface or from outer space. Now, the first term that is associated with GIS is photogrammetry. Photogrammetry is when you take photos from the Earth's surface, all right? It's the science of taking measurements from those photos and photographs to learn more about stuff here on Earth, whether you're making maps of towns, distances between places, and things like that. So you can use a drone when it's somewhat close to the Earth's surface, and when they take photos, that's called photogrammetry. Now, when you get images from far away, long distance images of the Earth's surface, that's called remote sensing. Remote means it's from distance, it's from far away. This is where we use satellites, maybe planes, high-level flying planes, maybe drones that can get way up above the Earth's surface can be used in remote sensing. The difference between the two is photogrammetry is devices that are used closer to the Earth's surface. Remote sensing is when you take photos that are far away from the Earth's surface, and that's why I have an image of a satellite there up in outer space. Now, who uses GIS? Let's answer that question right now as we move on. Who uses the idea of this geographic information system? Okay, well, a lot of groups do, and the groups are a wide variety. First off, let's talk about FedEx. Now, FedEx and delivery services like FedEx are up with the times, and they're very modern, and as our title of our lesson today says, they're very contemporary. They use GIS. They use the systems of capturing, storing, and displaying all this geographic data, for example, to improve their delivery routes, to improve on different routes that they take, to improve efficiency, to keep the customers more happy. And if you keep the customers more happy, you're going to make more money. So FedEx and companies delivery services like this definitely use GIS. Now, another organization that uses GIS is the government. All right, governments all over the world use this process and use this system to capture and store geographic data. For example, pipelines. Pipelines. There are maps and images of pipelines all over the United States, all over the cities. In Fort Lauderdale, we know that we're having problems with older houses, and other cities are experiencing this as well. Older houses and pipes bursting and so on. Well, guess what? The governments have already stored all that data and have all that geographic data because they used the concept of geographic information systems to come up with that data and make maps and so on. Archaeologists use it. You shouldn't be surprised for that. Anytime that we've seen an archaeological dig in your quiz or in the information you studied for your quiz, we talked about Cattle Hayek in Turkey and so on. There was a map found there on the wall. Well, archaeologists have used GIS to look at that original site and so on. What they do is, as I say in my note session, they map and record data on site. Obviously, archaeologists are contemporary now. They use contemporary tools. They put drones up above, so we can look down on these archaeological sites, and it makes them even more interesting than just looking at them on a flat map and so on. Corporations use GIS. That should not be a surprise to you. McDonald's, for example, chains like this, it doesn't exactly have to be a restaurant. It could be a gas station, a mobile station, any kind of store basically will be able to use GIS. They would use it to scope out new markets, to get data and organize geographic data to see how frequent a place is visited. If there's an open lot on a corner, what's around it? What's around it? Have things in the past been successful there and so on? So corporations, restaurants, gas stations, and folks like that will definitely use GIS to scope out the new markets. Now, the second contemporary graphic tool that we're going to talk about today is called Global Positioning Systems. Now, you know this. This is called GPS, and this is not a foreign concept to you because you have probably used the GPS on your phone very many times, and if not, you have witnessed your parents using GPS on their phones. Well, GPS is pretty simple to understand because we already know what it's all about. Basically, GPS determines the precise position of places on Earth. Now, the one thing that you might not know about GPS is how it works. In the United States, it includes a couple things, okay? So in the United States of America, dealing with GPS, there are 12 satellites that are in predetermined orbits, okay? So there's 12 satellites that are up above Earth, all right, within our orbits, looking down upon and working to find precise positions of things on Earth. Now, in the United States, there are tracking stations that are used to monitor the satellites, all right, to make sure that the satellites are up and running and so on. And then from the tracking stations, there are receivers, all right. Now, the receivers are the ones that tell the position, the velocity, the time, all of the images that can be found through GPS and so on to help us navigate, all right. So basically, who uses it? Well, GPS basically is used for navigation, all right? So you are most commonly going to have pilots of aircraft are going to basically be using GPS. Captains of the ship are going to use GPS and so on. We use it to find places. Some of us are not very good with direction, and we use it to find the local publics or find our way home sometimes, and you know who you are. Now, a term that's associated with GPS is geotagging. Geotagging. Geotagging is when you identify and you store information using GPS by using latitude and longitude. Now, geotagging is a highly controversial subject. Hence, my little image there, stop geotagging. Now, the reason why it's so controversial is because on our cell phones and on our devices, we have a GPS tracking device. There's a real debate that has gone on around the world forever since we've had this GPS, is whether we should have the GPS location service turned on or turned off. If it's turned on, you are going to be able to be tracked down if you're lost. If it's turned on, you also run the risk of having some pretty embarrassing information maybe become public when it gets hacked and so on. So there are advantages and disadvantages of having it on. The The debate about having it turned off has to do with your privacy as well, okay? Because under Amendment 4, we have searches and seizures and so on. Can a police officer use GPS to track you down in a criminal investigation? If you have it turned off, there's a debate that criminal activities are going to be done by cell phone, all right? Drug deals are made, things like that. It's not an activity where this should be protected, okay? So there's a lot of debate about having this location service called GPS turned on or turned off on our devices. Now, when we finish up today, we're actually going to look at some Florida laws and see what the law in Florida is, or some recent laws that were passed dealing with GPS location service and geotagging, because it is such a big deal. Now, the third contemporary tool that we're going to use, or term that deals with it, is called VGI. VGI is volunteered geographic information, and basically, to put it simple enough and instead of giving you a big scientific definition for it, it's when you make maps yourself. Okay, it's when you make maps yourself. There's a cool trend going on and around the world, and it has been for a while with drones and all these devices that we have now, called citizen science. And it's a trend where you as an individual are actually using devices to map, to collect geographic data. It's geographic data that is collected for free by you and I, by individuals, by amateur geographic scientists, citizen scientists. And it is a trend that is sweeping around the world because we have so much access to these devices and an absolute desire to map things. Now, the image that I just put on the screen is the image of a Google Maps dude. All right, have you guys ever seen these guys rolling around town? Well, guess what? This is a great example of VGI. This is a great example of making maps yourself, and Google is there for us. Now, one term that we'll finish up today with is the term mashup. Mashup. A mashup is a term that basically deals with VGI, volunteer geographic information. Now, a mashup is a map, and it's a map that basically overlays data or puts data on top of a map from another mapping service. Now, a little bit later today, we are going to be using, and we hopefully will be able to download Google Maps, okay? If you haven't done that already, we will. And we'll be using that. That's a great example of what Google Maps does. Now, over to the right there, the image is showing you a map of cell phone towers in California, all right? This is an example of a mashup. A mashup. You have towers that are registered, you have towers that are not registered, and then you have towers that in the future are going to be constructed and built, okay? This is an example of a mashup. Now, some of you might have heard of this term before. If there are any DJs in the house or people that love music, when hip-hop first came out a long time ago, when I was very young, DJs were taking songs and mixing 2 or more songs. When you mix 2 or more songs, and DJs do that, it's called a mashup, all right? And that's where we get that term from, and that's what this map is called. So today what we wanted to do was to just get introduced while going on with our lessons on geography and mapping, to look at these contemporary geographic tools, which you guys are probably very familiar with. Now, at this point, I want you, while we still have a little bit of time before you have to come back to me, I want you to search Florida's GPS privacy laws. And there are a couple recent ones that first came out. And let's go see what the state of Florida is doing with those privacy laws. So what's going to happen here, I left a little bit of time for you guys to do some research. Go search, once again, Florida's GPS privacy laws and look at some recent laws that were put in place dealing with this idea of GPS, having the tracking device on, having the tracking device off. Now, once you get done doing that, and once we get back and talk about this, our lesson for today is going to be within this keynote as well. All right, and I'll have this prepared for you, and we'll be able to look at it, and we're going to talk about doing something and working on something called a mental map. So go ahead and search Florida's GPS privacy laws. Take a few minutes, read a little bit about that, and be prepared to discuss that when we get back here in about 5 or 10 minutes.